"You're a useless old man." That's what she said, loud enough for my neighbors to hear, smiling like she was doing me a favor. Not thank you, not please, just that. Useless, old, a burden. I swallowed it like I always did, because that's what you do when your own family makes you feel small. I stood there, holding my grandson's backpack, feeling stupid for thinking I still mattered in my own damn house. The door closed, their car rolled away, and I was left with the kind of silence that hums in your ears and turns into rage if you let it sit too long. I didn't know yet that the humiliation was only the warm-up. I didn't know that the quiet kid standing behind me was about to rip my whole reality apart. And I definitely didn't know that someone had already decided I shouldn't make it through the week. My son and his wife left for a cruise vacation, asking me to look after my grandson, an 8-year-old kid who hadn't spoken a single word since the day he was born. Doctors called it nonverbal, labels, charts, shrugs. The second the front door shut behind him, the house felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. The boy stopped moving. He looked straight at me, dead serious, no kid stuff in his eyes anymore. And then he opened his mouth. His voice came out clear, calm, grown. "Grandpa, don't drink that." My blood ran cold. I'd been a soldier once. I thought I knew fear. Turns out real fear sounds like a child breaking 8 years of silence to warn you that something is very wrong and you're the target. And right then, standing in my kitchen, I realized this wasn't babysitting. It was war.
You're not watching him. You're just babysitting until we get back. Don't screw it up. She said it right there on my porch, loud, sharp, like I was some washed-up idiot they hired off Craigslist. My son didn't correct her, didn't even look at me, just stared at his phone while his wife talked down to me in front of my own neighbors. I nodded like a coward, swallowed the heat crawling up my spine, and held the door open while they walked past me like I was furniture. That's what I was to them. Background noise. An old man taking up space, the kind you don't bother explaining things to. The car pulled away. The house went dead quiet. And that's when the kid everyone said was broken looked at me like he knew something I didn't. Something I wasn't supposed to survive.
Inside my kitchen, my daughter-in-law set a small box on the counter like it mattered more than I did. Neat, careful, lined up just right. "Your tea," she said. "Chamomile, special blend, helps you sleep." I nodded. I always nod these days. Easier than arguing, easier than asking questions no one wants to answer. I don't remember complaining about sleep, but she kept talking like it was already decided. Twice a day, morning and night, no skipping. At my age, she said, routine was everything. Health, stability, safety. Something flickered in her eyes when she said it. Fast, sharp, gone before I could grab it. Old instincts stirred, the kind you pick up when you've lived long enough to know when something doesn't smell right. But I shoved it down. This wasn't a battlefield. This was my kitchen. This was family. My son stood in the doorway with their luggage. "We should head out," he said. He bent down and kissed his kid on the forehead. Quick, awkward, like it hurt him to hold the contact too long. He couldn't look the boy in the eyes. Not really. "Be good for Grandpa," his wife said. Her voice was flat, empty. "Remember what we talked about." The boy didn't respond. He never did. They left in a rush of fake smiles and forced gratitude. I stood on the porch, holding my grandson's hand, watching their car disappear down the street. Cool air, early fall, leaves just starting to turn. It should have felt peaceful. The door closed behind us. That's when his grip tightened, hard. Not a kid grabbing for comfort. This was urgency, panic. He dropped the stuffed elephant he'd carried everywhere since he was a toddler. His whole body started shaking. He pointed toward the kitchen, toward the box. I knelt down. "Hey, what's wrong, buddy?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again, like the words were trapped behind his teeth, fighting their way out. His eyes were wide, too old for his face, too aware. Then he spoke. "Grandpa," he whispered. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in a long time. "Don't drink the tea." The floor felt like it shifted under me. My hands grabbed his shoulders before I realized I'd moved. "What did you say?" His fingers clenched into my shirt. Tears filled his eyes, but his voice stayed steady. "Please, don't drink it. Mom put something bad in it." This kid hadn't said a single word in 8 years, not one. Doctors, specialists, labels, nonverbal, developmental, permanent. And now he was warning me like his life depended on it. I guided him to the table, poured us both water. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Not the tea," I said. "Never the tea again." He nodded, like he'd been waiting to hear that. "Tell me everything," I said. "Start at the beginning." He took a breath, then another. "I was 5, he said. "At the doctor's. I saw a toy and said, 'Mama,' just once. That night," he told me, "she came into his room after my son fell asleep. Told him if he ever spoke again without permission, he'd be taken somewhere he'd never come back from. Somewhere kids go to sleep forever." So I stopped talking to everyone. My jaw locked so tight it hurt. He'd understood everything, learned to read, watched every adult conversation, watched, remembered. 6 months earlier, he heard her on the phone, talking about medicine, confusion, making sure I wouldn't wake up. That's when I started hiding papers, evidence. I stared at this 8-year-old kid, realizing I wasn't the one protecting him. He was protecting me. I didn't ask him how long he'd been able to speak. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I asked the only question that mattered. "How long have you known?" He stared at his hands like he was afraid they'd betray him. Small fingers, clean nails, a kid's hands. But his voice, when it came, didn't sound like a kid at all. "Always," he said. "I just don't talk." The word hit me harder than anything else he'd said. Always. He told me he taught himself to read when he was 6, from captions on TV, from the books I left on the coffee table when I thought no one was paying attention. He said people talk freely around him because they think he's not listening. Adults lower their guard when they believe a child is invisible. "I hear everything," he said. "Everything." I leaned back in the chair and felt something old and ugly crawl up my spine. Rage, the kind that makes your jaw ache and your hands curl without permission. "When did you first hear about the tea?" I asked. 6 months ago, he said. Mom was on the phone in her room. I was supposed to be asleep. He said she talked about medicine, about confusion, about making sure you don't wake up when you're supposed to. He didn't know the names then, but he knew what it meant. He said she laughed when she talked about it, not a happy laugh, a relieved one. "That's when I started looking," he said. "Looking for what?" "Proof." The word sounded wrong coming from an 8-year-old's mouth, but his face didn't flinch. He wasn't guessing. He was reporting. He told me she kept papers, research, notes. Sometimes she'd leave them on her desk when it was just the two of them at home.
She'd make him stand there and watch while she worked because he couldn't tell anyone. She called him decoration, said he was lucky to be quiet. She forgot one, he said. One time. I felt the air in the room tighten. I didn't take everything, he went on quickly, just the important ones. If too much went missing, she would have noticed. I looked at this kid, this quiet, observant, terrified little soldier, and understood something that made my stomach drop. He hadn't been hiding from the world. He'd been surviving it. "Where are they?" I asked. He stood up without a word and motioned for me to follow. Upstairs, the hallway looked the same as it always had. Family photos, smiles frozen in frames, a version of us that never really existed. My wife in her garden, my son as a kid, Lucas as a baby, normal, clean, safe. Lies. His room still had the dinosaur wallpaper I helped put up years ago. I thought bright colors might help him open up. Turns out he'd been open the whole time, just not out loud. He knelt beside his bed and slid his fingers into a gap beneath a loose floorboard. It lifted easier than it should have, like it'd been moved 100 times already. He pulled out a thin stack of folded papers. My hands shook when I took them. The first page was printed from a medical website. Elder abuse, symptoms highlighted in yellow, memory loss, disorientation, sleep changes, confusion. Every symptom I'd been blaming on age. The second page made my chest tighten. Medication interactions, elderly patients, handwritten notes in the margins, dosages, timing, adjustments, careful, precise. The third page stopped my breathing. A timeline. My initials at the top. Dates, measurements, observations. First dose administered. Subject reports fatigue, attributes to aging. Dosage increased, memory lapses observed. Desired confusion patterns achieved. I read that line twice. Desired. Patterns. She hadn't been worried about me. She'd been calibrating me. The last entry was dated 4 days ago, the day they left. Prepared concentrated doses for travel period. Resolution expected within 48 to 72 hours. Resolution, that's what she called it. I sat down hard on the bed and stared at the papers in my lap like they might bite. "There's one more," he said quietly. He reached back into the gap and pulled out a single sheet from the bottom. A lab report. Names, numbers. 0% probability. I felt the room tilt. "I found it 2 years ago," he whispered. "That's why she hates me." I didn't let him finish. I pulled him into my chest so fast he gasped, held him like the house might collapse if I let go. "You listen to me," I said, my voice low and rough. "Blood doesn't decide who you are. Choice does." He shook against me, 8 years of silence breaking all at once. And as I held him there, surrounded by proof that someone had been planning my death like a spreadsheet, I realized something else. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted him erased.
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't pace the room like a man losing control. That's what she expected from me. Confusion, panic, a slow unraveling. I'd already given her that version for months. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of me like a bad poker hand and forced myself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the same way I'd done it decades ago when things went sideways and people depended on me not to lose my head. Lucas stood across from me, watching, waiting. "This doesn't leave the house," I said. He nodded, not scared, focused. "This stays between us until I say otherwise." Another nod. That's when it hit me.
This kid wasn't looking for comfort. He was waiting for orders. I folded the papers back the way he'd hidden them and slid them into a manila envelope. The tea box sat on the counter like it was mocking me. I didn't throw it away, didn't touch it. I left it exactly where she'd placed it. Appearances matter when someone thinks they're winning. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I trusted to tell me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. A doctor I'd known for years, not a friend of a friend, someone who'd look me in the eye and tell me if I was already too far gone. "Mark," I said when he picked up. "Harold, what's going on?" "Just do it," I said. "Please." He showed up within the hour with a nurse and a look on his face that told me he already suspected more than he was saying. They drew blood at the kitchen table. Lucas sat on the stairs and watched quietly, like he was memorizing every step. "Results tomorrow morning," Mark said before he left. "If something's wrong, I know," I cut in. "Just call me." After the door closed, Lucas spoke again. His voice was steadier now, stronger, like using it once had reminded him it belonged to him. "She's gonna call tonight," he said. I looked at him. "How do you know?" "She always does. Second day, same time." "What time?" 8. I checked the clock. 6:47. She didn't just plan medications, she planned people. "All right," I said. "Then we let her think it's working." His eyebrows pulled together. "How?" I smiled without humor, by giving her exactly what she expects. We spent the next hour rehearsing. I practiced forgetting things on purpose, repeating myself, losing my train of thought halfway through sentences. I slurred just enough to sound tired without sounding drunk. Every time I overdid it, Lucas corrected me. "Too clear," he said. "She won't believe that." I adjusted. "Better," he said. The phone rang at exactly 8. Predictable. I waited 2 rings before answering. "Hello?" "Oh, Harold," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "How are you feeling? How's Lucas?" I let the silence stretch, counted to 5 in my head. "Lucas," I said slowly. "Yes, he's good. Quiet." "Have you been eating?" she asked. "I think so. Did I eat lunch today?" Across the table, Lucas gave me a small nod. "That's concerning," she said, and I could hear it, the satisfaction she didn't bother hiding anymore. "Have you been drinking your tea?" I glanced at the box on the counter. "Yes," I said. "Helps me sleep. I sleep a lot now." "That's normal," she said quickly. "At your age, rest is important." I leaned into it. "I keep thinking I see Mary in the house, in the garden. Was she here yesterday?" There was a pause this time. Then her voice softened. "Oh, Harold, that must be so hard for you." When I hung up, my hands were steady. My pulse was calm. "She believed it," Lucas said, amazed. "Good," I replied. "That buys us time." The next morning, Mark called before I'd even finished my coffee. His voice was tight, professional, controlled. "There are multiple sedatives in your system, none of them prescribed. Levels are high. Another week like this, and you'd be looking at permanent damage, or worse." I closed my eyes. "So I'm not crazy," I said. "No," he replied. "You're being poisoned." He told me to call the police immediately. I told him I needed 1 more day. Silence on the line. 24 hours, he said finally. "That's it." I hung up and turned to Lucas. "We finish this tomorrow, but we finish it clean." He swallowed. "What if I freeze?" I leaned forward. "You've been brave for 8 years. 1 more day." That night, neither of us slept. I sat in my chair, staring at my wife's photo on the mantel, wondering how long someone could watch a family rot from the inside before they did something about it. Tomorrow, the people who thought they were in control were coming home, and they had no idea the house was no longer theirs.
I heard the car before I saw it. That sound, tires on gravel, engine idling just a second too long, did something to me. Flicked a switch I hadn't felt since I was young and everything depended on timing. The house went quiet. Not peaceful, alert. Lucas looked at me from across the living room. "Now," I said. He nodded once and sat on the floor near my chair, arranging his toys the way she liked to see them. Neat, still, silent. Back into the role he'd been forced to play for 8 years. I slumped into the armchair and let my shoulders sag, shirt half-buttoned, hair uncombed. I'd skipped shaving on purpose. The mirror that morning showed me exactly what she wanted to see, a man coming apart. The front door opened. "We're home," she called out, bright and fake. She stepped into the living room first, sun-kissed skin, relaxed posture. She took one look at me and her eyes flickered, irritation, quick and sharp, like she'd expected to find an ambulance instead of a breathing man. Then the mask slid back into place. "Oh, Harold," she said, "you look exhausted." I squinted at her like I was trying to place her face. "Amber, you're back already," she said. 4 days, just 4. I repeated it slowly. 4 days? She smiled. My son came in behind her with the luggage. The color drained from his face when he saw me. "Dad," he said, "are you okay?" She shot him a look so fast it could have cut glass. "He's just tired," she said. "These things happen at his age." She sat down on the couch like she owned the place, like she'd already won. "Have you been drinking your tea?" she asked casually. I nodded. "Helps me sleep. I sleep all the time now." Her mouth twitched, just a little. "That's good," she said. "Very good." She turned to my son. "See? He's declining faster than we thought. We really need to talk about next steps." My son shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Maybe we should—" "Christopher," she cut in, sharp, "your father needs help." She turned back to me, voice lowering, warming. "Harold, how would you feel about a place where people could take care of you, where nurses could watch over you?" I stared at the carpet. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," she said, but the words were hollow. "But nature takes its course. Some people fade quicker." She started talking about facilities, about finances, about the house. Every word was being recorded. I stayed quiet, let her talk, let her bury herself. That's when Lucas stood up, slow, deliberate. She stopped mid-sentence. "Lucas, sit down." He didn't look at her. He walked to the bookshelf. Her face tightened. "What are you doing?" He reached behind the old war books and pulled out the recorder. "This has been recording since you walked in," he said. The room froze. Her face went white. "And I can talk," he continued, voice steady. "I pretended because you said you'd hurt Grandpa if I spoke." My son stared at his kid like he was seeing a ghost. I stood up straight, dropped the act. "Funny thing," I said. "Turns out stopping your tea clears the head right up." She stumbled back. "You're not confused?" "No," I said, "not even a little." I picked up the folder from beside my chair and opened it. "October 10th, I read. Prepared concentrated doses, permanent resolution in 48 to 72 hours. My son's face collapsed. "She's been poisoning me for 2 years. She lunged for Lucas. I moved without thinking, caught her wrist mid-air. "Touch him," I said quietly, "and it'll be the last mistake you ever make." She thrashed, spat. "He's not even your real grandson." I didn't loosen my grip. "He's more family than you'll ever be." I looked down at Lucas. "Call 911. He didn't hesitate. Sirens wailed in the distance. She went still.
and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked scared.
The sirens grew louder until they drowned out everything else. She stopped fighting when she heard them, went still like an animal that knows the cage is closing. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating, already trying to rewrite the story in her head. "It's a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "He's confused. He's always been confused." I didn't answer. Lucas stood behind me, one hand gripping the back of my shirt. I could feel him shaking now that it was real, now that the pretending was over. The front door burst open and 2 officers stepped inside. Calm, professional, hands ready but not raised. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. I stepped aside so they could see her wrist still locked in my grip. "Attempted poisoning, elder abuse, child endangerment," I said. "It's all recorded." She started screaming then, loud, desperate, said I'd manipulated the boy, said Lucas was disturbed, said I was senile and dangerous. She pointed at the recorder like it was a weapon. The officers didn't react. They'd already listened to it. They cuffed her while she yelled my name like it was a curse. When they led her out, she twisted around one last time and spat, "You were supposed to disappear quietly." That's when my son collapsed into the chair. "Dad," he said, voice breaking, "I didn't think she'd actually—" I cut him off. "You knew enough." He stared at the floor. "She threatened divorce," he whispered, "said she'd take everything. So you let her silence your kid. You let her poison me." He didn't argue. Lucas came back from the kitchen. "They're taking her," he said quietly. I nodded. The house felt hollow once they were gone, like all the air had been sucked out with her. Over the next 3 days, the system moved slowly but steadily. Detectives interviewed us separately. Lucas answered every question in a clear, steady voice. No hesitation, no coaching. He told them about the threats, the silence, the papers, the tea. They believed him. A child psychologist evaluated him the following week. High intelligence, trauma response, coercive control. 8 years of forced silence documented as psychological abuse. My blood tests came back official. Sedatives, antihistamines, sleep aids, all unprescribed, all dangerous. Another week, the doctor said, and I wouldn't have been myself anymore, if I'd been alive at all. The trial moved faster than I expected. Evidence stacked up. Handwritten notes, lab results, the recording, the tea packets pulled from my cabinet. Her defense tried to claim I planted everything, tried to say Lucas was coached, tried to argue the recording was manipulated. They couldn't explain her handwriting. They couldn't explain the drugs. They couldn't explain her voice. The judge sentenced her to 15 years. My son got probation. The judge didn't go easy on him. "Silence enabled abuse," she said from the bench. "You chose comfort over protection." At the custody hearing, my son stood up without prompting. "I relinquish my rights," he said. "Lucas deserves better." The judge looked at me. "Are you willing?" I didn't hesitate. A month later, I visited my son in the county jail. He looked smaller, older, broken in a way that doesn't heal fast. "How is he?" he asked. "Talking non-stop," I said. "Thriving." Tears slid down his face. "I was weak," he said. "I know that doesn't fix it." "No," I replied, "it doesn't." He asked me to tell Lucas he loved him. I'll tell him. What he does with that is his choice. I didn't visit again. 6 months passed. Spring turned into early summer. The house changed. Laughter came back slowly, hesitant at first, then real. Lucas filled the silence he'd been forced to carry for 8 years. School stories, questions, dreams. Sometimes he'd just hum while doing homework. I never told him to stop, because silence had almost killed us both. 6 months after everything blew apart, the house finally stopped feeling like a crime scene. Not because I forgot what happened, because we survived it. Spring slid into early summer the way it always does. Slow mornings, longer light, the smell of cut grass drifting through open windows. Lucas and I settled into a rhythm that didn't need explaining. Breakfast at the same time, homework at the kitchen table, evenings on the back porch when the air cooled enough to breathe. He talked constantly now, not because he had something urgent to say, because he could. He told me about school, about how his teacher smiled the first time he raised his hand and answered out loud, about how some kids stared like they were trying to match the voice to the quiet kid they thought they knew. "They'll get used to it," I said. He nodded. "I know." He was ahead in most subjects, reading especially. The counselor suggested skipping a grade, said he'd been learning in silence longer than most kids learn out loud. Sometimes I caught him watching me, not in a scared way, just checking, making sure I was still there, still breathing, still real. I didn't mind. On Saturdays, we went fishing at the reservoir outside town. Nothing fancy. 2 folding chairs, a small tackle box, lines cast into water that reflected the sky like it didn't know what had happened beneath it. One morning he told me his science presentation got the highest grade in the class. "Sound waves," he said, proud but trying not to show it. Mrs. Brooks said it was the best one she'd seen. I smiled. Figures. He grinned back, wide, unafraid. He still met with the psychologist once a week, not because anything was wrong, because some things deserve to be unpacked properly. She said trauma doesn't disappear just because the danger does. It changes shape, gets quieter, smarter. So does strength. One afternoon, while we were resetting the fishing lines, he asked the question I knew was coming eventually. "Do you ever think about my real dad?" I didn't pretend not to hear him. "No," I said, "because I'm looking at my grandson right now." He was quiet for a moment. The breeze rippled the water. "Can I still use your last name?" he asked. I turned to him fully. "You earned it," I said. "You showed more courage than most adults ever do." His shoulders relaxed like he'd been carrying that weight longer than I realized. A letter arrived from jail a few weeks later. My son's handwriting, shaky, careful, apologetic. I didn't open it right away. I put it in a drawer, let it sit there. Some things don't need immediate answers. Some things wait until you're strong enough to read them without reopening old wounds. Lucas knew about it. I didn't hide it. "Do you hate him?" he asked one night. I thought about it. "No," I said, "but that doesn't mean I trust him." He accepted that. Trust, I learned, isn't automatic. It's built, or it's gone. The house filled with noise again. Not chaos, not shouting, just life. Plates clinking, a radio playing low,
Lucas humming while he did his homework, the same tune over and over, like he was testing the sound of freedom. Sometimes I caught myself listening too hard, waiting for silence to mean danger again. It never did. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the porch gold, Lucas leaned against the railing beside me. "Grandpa," he said, "I think I want to help kids like me when I grow up." "Kids who don't talk?" I asked. He shook his head. "Kids who are scared." I didn't answer right away. "You will," I said, finally. "You already are." He smiled and went back inside, voice carrying through the house as he talked to himself about something only he understood. I stayed on the porch a while longer, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just listening. Because once, silence almost killed us. And now, every sound meant we were still here.
"You're not his real family. This is just temporary." That's what someone said to me after everything was over. Not quietly, out loud, like it was obvious. Like 8 years of fear, silence, and survival didn't count because the paperwork said otherwise. I stood there nodding again, same old habit, swallowing that familiar heat in my chest. Funny how people think the danger ends when the police leave. Funny how they think the hardest part is over once the truth comes out. They don't see what lingers. They don't hear the questions that come late at night. They don't understand that surviving the storm doesn't mean the sky suddenly clears. Some battles don't end with sirens. Some start after the noise stops. I want to help kids like me when I grow up. He said it casually, like he was talking about wanting to be a firefighter or a baseball player. We were sitting by the water that afternoon, lines cast out, the sun hanging low enough to make everything look softer than it really was. His voice didn't shake when he said it. That's how I knew he meant it. "Kids who don't talk?" I asked. He shook his head. "Kids who are scared." That one hit me harder than I let on, because fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like obedience. Sometimes it looks like a child learning very early that staying quiet is the safest move in the room. "You'll do it," I said. "You already understand them better than most adults ever will." He looked at me, searching my face like he needed permission to believe it. "You really think so?" "You survived 8 years," I told him, "and you saved both of us. That's not luck, that's strength." Before he could answer, his fishing rod jerked hard, the line bent tight and alive. His eyes went wide. "I got something." We both grabbed the rod, hands overlapping, working together. The line fought back, cutting through the water like it didn't want to give up. "Easy," I said. "Let it run. Don't rush it." After a short struggle, a small bass broke the surface, flashing silver in the sunlight. He laughed, full, unguarded, loud, a sound I don't take for granted anymore. Not ever. We brought the fish in, and I showed him how to support it properly before letting it go. He watched closely, then gently lowered it back into the water, holding it steady until it kicked free and disappeared. "Grandpa," he asked as we reset the lines, "do you think Dad will ever come back?" I didn't answer right away. I've learned that rushing honesty does more damage than silence ever did. "I don't know," I said finally. "He's dealing with his own mess, his own guilt. But listen to me, we're okay." He nodded. "Better than okay." The breeze moved across the water. The sun climbed higher. He hummed quietly while watching his line, a habit he picked up once he realized no one was going to punish him for making noise anymore.
a sound he'd been denied for most of his life. The army taught me about duty. My son taught me about disappointment. But Lucas taught me something else entirely. Family isn't blood. It's who stands in the fire with you when everything goes wrong. A couple of weeks later, he had his first real session with the therapist. When she called me afterward, she didn't talk about damage. She talked about insight, empathy, awareness. She said something I haven't forgotten since, that trauma doesn't just break people. Sometimes it sharpens them. A letter came from jail not long after, my son's handwriting, careful, apologetic. I haven't opened it yet. Maybe one day, maybe Lucas will. That decision doesn't belong to me alone. At my age, I didn't expect to find purpose again. I thought that part of my life was behind me. But here I am, not as a soldier, not as a man chasing redemption, but as the grandfather of a boy who found his voice and refused to let silence kill him. Some families are born. Ours was forged under pressure. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you've ever ignored that tight feeling in your chest, that moment where something didn't sit right, don't brush it off. I did, and it almost cost us everything. If you're raising a grandchild, caring for an aging parent, or watching a child who's gone quiet in a way that doesn't feel natural, pay attention, ask questions, push back. Silence protects the wrong people. Lucas and I are still here because someone finally spoke and someone finally listened. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever sensed something was wrong but stayed quiet? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story hit close to home, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the most dangerous battles don't happen in public. They happen behind closed doors. Thank you for listening. Stay sharp, stay aware, and never ignore a silence that feels too heavy.